welcome. There are plenty of seats, so please find your place. And we're running a few minutes late, so we'll jump in. I'm Chris O'Brien, your moderator, and welcome. We have a distinguished group here, so we'll jump in. I'll ask each of you just to present yourself very briefly here. We'll start to my right with Frederic.
Hi, Chris. Thanks for your invitation. I'm delighted to be here with you. I'm Fred. I'm the CEO of ZEBOX, and ZEBOX, if I can summarize what ZEBOX is, the accelerator of innovation of the CMS CGM group.
I'm Pascal Cagni. I'm the chairman, non-executive of Business France, which is the agency which is helping 12,000 companies to export, as well as helping investors, foreign investors to invest. I'm also the French ambassador for foreign investment, and I'm the founder of C4 Ventures.
And hello, I'm Anne Bouverot. I had the pleasure of organizing the AI Action Summit last year. I'm also the chair of the board of one of our universities, Ecole Normale, Supérieure, and I also co-chair the National AI and Digital Council. Lovely to be here.
And that's all you do.
A few other things.
So actually that sets us up well. So it's interesting timing to be here in that sense, because we're, of course, about 1 year, not quite exactly, but close, from the AI Summit, and of course 1 week from the India Summit, the sequel. So let's reflect on that a bit. We'll start with you, Anne. In the year since then, can you talk a little bit about, what has changed in Europe's AI ecosystem since then that you've expected, and maybe what hasn't changed in the way maybe you had hoped since then as we look back the past year and we get ready for the next summit?
Excellent, yes, thank you. So, of course, it was an international summit, and there were a number of themes and actions. I won't go through all of them, but in terms of European sovereignty, it was a very strong wake-up call, in part because Stargate had been announced a few weeks before. DeepSeek had revealed itself a few weeks before as well, and we had very strong speeches at the summit, in particular regarding the US position on AI. So I think as a result of that, the recognition of the importance of digital technological sovereignty in Europe has really stepped up. All the surveys show that. Citizens throughout Europe, in France, in Italy, in Germany, in the UK, more than 80 or 85% of them say it's either important or very important. That's one thing that has changed, and for the better. And there was a summit on European digital sovereignty organized in Berlin in November last year as a result of that. And at the level of the European Commission, there's a clear understanding that it's not only regulation, it's what we can do to innovate in Europe, and not only at the level of 27 countries, but maybe with subsets of countries, maybe with allied countries like Switzerland or UK or Canada or India, depending on the case. So there's a number of other things, but I think that understanding and awareness and priority is really a new thing, and I welcome that. Now, in terms of what we have done, journalists often ask me, so yeah, that was the awareness. Now we understand we need digital sovereignty. Why don't we have it? Well, because it takes time. It takes time to make sure that research can get into startups, that startups can get into scale-ups, that partnerships between startups and larger companies can reach scale as well, that adoption happens in companies. So I see a momentum, but clearly we need to do more.
Yeah, and it's interesting timing in that respect, because even just in the last couple of weeks, to the last part that you're discussing, we've seen a lot of interesting announcements just in a very concrete, mundane, quotidian level about the launch of things like Visio, or very concrete tools that, based on open source, just for government agents, things like.
Actually, for several years, our government have done their jobs. The France 2030 plans, $54 billion was done. We had, at the announcement of the forum that you chaired, $109 billion, which has been announced. $63 billion have been essentially deployed. And my team at Business France, we are supporting something like 60 projects where you have a piece of land, knock, 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 hello, EDF, can you give me the right grid and the right energy? Yes, and that's what's happening. So I think we don't need to be over-optimistic. We need to realize that our strength resides into our companies, in the data that we own, into the large market we have. And yes, in Europe this time around, we haven't missed it. And yes, not our enemies, but our adversary, we always point out, oh, you, Europe, you're slow, you basically regulate. You know what? Screw you. We want to regulate, okay? We want to have an AI frameworks because we believe exactly what you said, that we want a different way of looking at this. So I think we need to stand extremely still, continue to do the job, deploy capital, ensure that our university deliver the startup, deploy the capital and so on. And if we do so, we are in the race and will continue to be in the race.
Okay, and so I know there's no bigger believer in France and Europe than you, Pascal. But let me turn that around, because I know also nobody will sit here and say everything's perfect, obviously. So again, I'll put this to both you and Anne. Looking back at whatever, as much progress has been made, what are the things that you feel like need to be addressed still? What are the big challenges now as we move forward that are the bottlenecks, that are the priorities to really continue to accelerate, to move things forward? And maybe I'll start with you on that question.
Yeah, well, one thing is we need more capital for startups and scale-ups. I'll leave that to Pascal because he's doing great things on this. I'll let him speak about that if he wishes. I also think that we need to have, it's part something that people just need to want to do, and part of it can also maybe be put in some sort of framework. It's a European preference. We need to make sure we have that reflects that when there's a contract to be placed, we always look at, is there a European company that could provide that? It doesn't mean that we will stop working with American companies, for example. Of course, we will continue. But we need to make sure we have a choice. And whenever we can, either for a new startup or for a more mature company, look at whether there would be a European solution that would match. I think that's that concept of European preference. We've had this idea of being open to the world, which is great, but we also need to have more of a European preference. And then there's a couple of things like in terms of compute. Yes, we spoke about the data centers, as Pascal said, the announcements, and then the ones that are coming in France. We already have supercomputers, Jean-Zé in France, Jupiter in Germany, tomorrow Alice Recoq in France, and then the AI gigafactories. We need more of that, and we need to have that compute strategically allocated to research, to innovation, to the best bets that we have to create European champions. And we need to be more concrete and effective in terms of data, because as Patrick said, of course we have, Pascal, sorry, said we have lots of data in Europe with all the companies that you mentioned, Pascal, but we don't yet have the data sets at European level that can really be leveraged for adoption and then also to create leaders. So we need to do more in this direction. But Pascal, I'm sure you'll want to add a few things.
No, I obviously, no, we're not naive. I'm a businessman. So, I mean, the ratio of capital deployed in AI, Europe to US is 1 to 10. So we have a question there. We got a fragmentations. We never have the right scale. We're not specialized enough. How many cluster of AIs is there in Europe? Most likely 3 or 4 times too many. But once you say that, let's go back not to the positive side, but just to the fact, is that when you attract capital and talent, you're on something. And that's what's happening right now. When you basically have also the adoptions phase, which is coming, which is start to be not a huge delta, amazing enough, into the large companies in Europe versus US, I think is a positive. So I think the job of such a forum and what we do is to really ensure that all the small, medium-sized company, the Mittelstand in Germany, the small, medium-size of Italy in the north of Italy really adopt that. And then let me a little bit, and I know you love that, Chris, be provocative. No, I've been told for a year, year and a half that my country is indebted. That soon we will be on the brinks of a bankruptcy. You know what? I gain over the time the deep convictions that if we don't want to go further along into the impoverishment of Europe as a way defined by the GDP per capita, we need actually all together, right, like we did at the time of the last huge crisis of COVID, to increase dramatically and borrow money. That's actually amazing enough. I was reading in the press just on the way back here that the President Macron suggested Eurobonds. When you talk to the economists, into the people which are in the know, they recognize that the sous-jacent, which is basically what is below our asset as such in Europe, there is absolutely a way for us to borrow more money. Now, why I'm saying that? Because if not, any of you being 30 in the rooms will be in a much poorer country or continent within 10 to 20 years. So we need to be counterintuitive, recognize that if we join our forces all together, we'll be able to borrow the money, reduce the gap with the US. Some of this money may be actually not real out there, right? Everyone talks about the bubble. And if we do so, I think we can go back in the race and actually become a real contender. Because the depth, the savoir-faire, you live here, Chris, right, is such that we can basically make it happen time after time.
Now, Fred, I want to turn to you. Pascal had raised the topic of corporates and startups earlier. And you sit at an interesting position in that question. As a journalist following the ecosystem, this is one of the major topics that entrepreneurs raise to me. We're all familiar at this moment. There's a big discussion. I think a lot of young entrepreneurs are very anxious. They're hearing that, especially if you're in AI, you should go to San Francisco, and you hear that sometimes because of the money, but often they hear you can move faster, and they hear you can move faster because the corporates move faster. You can get your first customers, your clients. The French companies, the European companies, they don't move as fast. And there's been a lot of programs. The French Tech has the Choisir the French Tech. There's a lot of progress being made. There's a lot of effort. It's been a big focus, policy, et cetera, here in France to change that dynamic. So concretely, can you talk a little bit more about ZEBOX and how you work and your role with your corporate parent? I know it's more than just AI, but can you give us some perspective about that dynamic between the corporate and the startup and how you're trying to change that?
Thank you, Chris. At the CMA-CGM, we think that to scale projects, we need to develop cooperation between startups and group. And it's a reason why ZEBOX exists. ZEBOX, as I said, it's the accelerator of innovation of the CMA-CGM group, funded by Rodolphe Saadé, the chairman of the CMA-CGM. And our mission is to understand problem statements of corporate partners and scout best innovation around the world, thanks to our 6 international hubs. And when we spot an innovation, we propose them to integrate the ZEBOX Club. Our mission is to connect best innovation to the business. So to scale projects, we think that one of our tools, our solution, is to implement innovation come from startups in our business unit. So we have a process to do that. You need to be selected by the steering committee of ZEBOX, composed of 15 vice president level members of the group. And each vice president represents one business unit. If you are selected by our steering committee, you have a kind of godfather, a kind of sponsor in the group, and your sponsor will going to help you to find a way to implement your innovation in the group. And it's one of the best way to experiment, to try to test your innovation in a real case study, come from an industrial partner, an industrial godfather. And another part, of course, of another possibility of the same message after that is to invest in the startup, but only if we realize a test, a POC, proof of concept of this innovation in one of the terminals of the group or one of our vessels. And if you succeed, you can pass the second step, and we can eventually invest in your project. So this connection to help startups to scale and become the new leaders of tomorrow on AI or maybe on our tech, for us is to connect innovation come from startup to the business.
But does the company see that also as an important strategy for transforming itself in terms of its technology and its strategy, or is it mostly just an avenue for supporting the startups?
Yeah, of course. It's the reason why we like to work with startups is to transform the CMA-CGM group, because of course it's not the oldest group in France, but we need to be competitive with our competitors, and we think that the AI is of course one of the key point to grow and go there through the success. But our experimentation are here to develop three things: reduce our environmental impact, to work on our competitiveness with IT, and of course the AI is in this field, and to work to be careful on our employees. And of course, there's a lot of solution in France, around the world, and at the moment, last year, we work and we implement, we test 25 innovation come from startups, and most of them come from France, of course.
All right, thank you. And Pascal, just from the viewpoint of Business France, I mean, do you feel like there's finally some movement on this front? I know there was a study that was just published in Ecole, I think this week or last week, that seemed to indicate there was growing purchases from startups. So the numbers seem better, but do you think from a cultural management standpoint, people are getting the message and that there's more of a connection there, or is it still a fight to really put them together?
We're failing miserably, right? We've got a bunch of leaders, political guys, which doesn't understand that if this is our last chance, the AI frontier for Europe is the last chance for us to go back and stay in the race. So it's not just a statement, right? Europe controls 25% of the industrial outputs. If we can extract 3, 4, 5% of productivity gain, you know, the unfamous productivity gain that we haven't extracted over the last 25 years, looking at the Draghi reports, right? So if we just focus on 4, 5% of the industrial output, extract productivity gain by having POC, MVP of AI in each of that, we can get back in the race. We have massive handicap in Europe. When I'm European and I basically start my journey, I have sandbags. The cost of compliance, the fragmentations is 20-34% of a cost. So how do I need to do? I need to embrace the next revolutions which is at stake, to basically be able to basically get out of these sandbags and project myself. So I think we need to have a positive speeches. We need to show that it's happening. The year and a half, 2 years which just passed by have been incredible. I have the privilege, and maybe is why I need to be, can be a little more optimistic, to see all of these investors lining up, coming here and saying, we want to have grants, We want to be doing data centers, building up R&D centers. I see also that the fact that we publish here in Europe. When I have EMI Labs, which is decided to come here, is a good news, right? That's the tree hiding the forest in some respect, but something positive. So we are not doing good enough. That's why such a forum, why I wanted to be here, is to say to you as an audience that we need to be totally embracing that, play the role of testimony, be ambassador of the AI. If Europe doesn't do it, we screw up for the rest of the 10, 20, 34 years. So we have no other chance. So that's what I think President Macron, you, my dear Anne, some of the most forward leaders like Draghi has been stating, and that's what we need to embrace quick. But it's now, it's urgent, right? And what you do, Frederic, is critical, right? It's about the adoptions, it's showing into a large groups how you do it. I went to see your AI Summit in Marseille early September. I was amazed to see the concept. We need to have more of the large group doing it, and the preference, the national preference is also a must-do. So I think we're getting there, but we need to accelerate.
And then any other thoughts from you on that?
Yes, well, first of all, I wholeheartedly agree on the adoption for reasons of productivity. If we want to sustain our system in Europe, which is a system that is very protective of workers, of people who retire, etc., we need to have the money to do that, and it's eroding our ability to do that. So yes, we need to get the productivity gains thanks to AI that will enable us to do that, and yes, we have, over the past 20 years, failed to do so. So there's an urgency to get on the adoption bandwagon, which is why we need training, which is why we need in companies, by government, everywhere, we need to understand how to implement AI. But at the same time, and this is the title of the panel, how do we build leaders, not followers? So yes, we can become leaders by adopting faster and strengthening our companies, and absolutely we need to do that. I argue that we also need to be and can be leaders in AI. If we see the 100 most notable AI models that have been developed in the past year, only 6 of them were developed outside of the US and China. That's not okay, and that's not okay for 3 reasons. That's not okay from a democratic perspective. We don't want to be left at some point with a choice between Grok and DeepSeek. We want more choice than that. That's also not okay from an economic perspective, because if one day all these models become closed, today we're piggybacking on the open source bandwagon, and we're adopting and using these models, which is great. If they become closed, what will we have? Just a choice to pay more, which is not what we want for our economy, and also for a reason of national security and defense. So, and so that's why we need to build leaders in AI, and I argue that we can. We have the talent, we have compute, we need more, but we have compute. We have money in Europe, we need to allocate it more to investment and innovation and research, but we have money. We have a market, we have a huge market with large companies, so we just need to find a way to do it and to do it fast.
But just to finish that thought, is especially on the frontier model or that part of it, is that more about the research end of it, or is it the LLM, the private company part, or is it both?
So it's both, but maybe let me use a minute to explain that. First of all, the concept frontier, that really means what is it that we haven't discovered yet? So this notion of there's more research to be done in frontier AI, that's true. That's why, for example, Yann Lequin's AmiLabs startup is researching in another part of the frontier than LLMs. His area is world models. There's other examples. Gradium, for example, is researching in the area of voice and doing a spin-off out of QTI. UMA, a spin-off out of Hugging Face, is in the AI for robotics area. Those are 3 domains that are not strictly LLMs, where we have the talent and we need to do more fundamental research, but also more startups and spin-offs to get to have many bets and many champions at the frontier. So I believe we can do both, and we have these examples that I've mentioned, but we also need to more systematically try to do more.
Okay, we need to wrap up, but Pascal, I'll let you have one last
And
word.
just to illustrate what you said, forget the LLM below, you need basically a new chips and processors, right? I have the privilege in my real life to be a manager and investors. When I see what we do at Arago, right, which has been raising an amazing amount of money, trying to basically disrupt that. When you see the 4 or 5 leaders that were in quantum computing, right? I was an investor in PSI Quantum, we're on Anies and Bob. When I see Neura Robotics, aside of Boston Dynamics, which is actually making a huge differences, right, on the humanoids, cobots type of area, leveraging on the platform AI, here again, there is so many other areas where Europe is demonstrating that we can make it happen. So we're going to be leaders and not only followers.
Great. We'll end on that note. Thank you all very much for joining us, and please give them a warm round of applause.